අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First to 9, this Friday the 17th of March 2023. Declines. Manufacturing and services PMI decline in the month of February, reports a central bank. Grave repercussions. The government won't be able to wash their hands off the repercussions of constantly postponing elections indefinitely, says the PAFRL. Benefits. Ministry of Finance announces new interest-free loan scheme for A-level students unable to qualify for state universities. Unanimous. Over 190 countries unanimously vote on banning Sri Lanka from the FIFA.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබා ගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka today stated that the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Indices recorded an index value of 42.3, while the service sector PMI recorded 48.7 for the month of February. The decline in manufacturing PMI was attributed to reductions in new orders and production, while the services PMI saw a decline due to a drop in new business activities, new businesses and employment. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Indices recorded an index value of 42.3 in February, indicating a continued setback in manufacturing activities on a month-on-month basis. The setback was driven by subdued performance observed in new orders, production, employment and stock of purchases. The decline in new orders and production was mainly driven by subdued demand observed in the manufacturing of food and beverages and textile and wearing apparel sectors. Many respondents representing the food and beverage sector mentioned that the decline in demand was mainly due to the deterioration of purchasing power of the consumers. However, they expect demand to increase on a month-on-month basis, targeting the festive season in April. Further, many manufacturers mentioned that the latest round of electricity tariff hikes adversely affected their cost structure. Meanwhile, employment and stock of purchasers also continued their downward trajectory, in line with the decline in new orders and production. It was observed that the manufacturers maintained material stock inventory at a minimum level, considering subdued demand conditions and the declining trend of global commodity prices, freight and exchange rates. Further, suppliers' delivery time remained unchanged at the previous month's level. However, the global manufacturing PMI reached a neutral threshold of 50 in February, with an increase of 0.9 index points from January 2023. Manufacturing PMIs of China and Russia improved at a higher pace in February 2023, when it increased at a slower rate in India compared to the previous month. However, manufacturing PMIs of the Eurozone, UK, USA and Singapore deteriorated in February 2023 compared to the previous month. In the meantime, the service sector PMI saw similar declines as the index value fell by 48.7 last month. This was driven by the declines observed in new businesses, business activities, employment and backlog of work. New businesses declined in February 2023 compared to January 2023, particularly with the decreases observed in transportation, insurance and postal and courier subsectors. Business activities in the services sector declined in February 2023 after 6 months of continuous growth. Accordingly, business activities related to wholesale and retail trade subsector continued to deteriorate amid subdued consumer demand driven by diminishing purchasing power. However, global services PMI rose to 52.6 in February from 50 in January 2023, signaling an expansion in global service activities. Services PMIs of China, India, the UK, the US and Japan indicated that their service sectors expanded in February 2023 compared to the month before. The former MP of the National People's Power, Vasantha Samarasinghe, filed a writ petition against the new Central Bank Act with the Supreme Court today. In the writ petition against the CBSL Act, the former MP of the Parliament alleges that certain provisions of the new Act violate the Constitution. He stated that the plaintiff pointed out that certain provisions in the Central Bank Amendment Bill pose a threat to the sovereignty of the central bank. The petitioner further highlighted that the new Act allows the finance minister to intervene in the affairs of the bank, and it would also take away the responsibility of the bank held towards the Parliament. Now, the People's Action for Free and Fair Elections today directed a letter towards Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, pointing out that no one would be able to relinquish themselves from the responsibilities of the repercussions that follow the government's arbitrary postponement of elections. The PAFREL further raised 4 questions regarding the procedure of the election and how it would be held, given that certain amendments were made to the initial procedure. The People's Action for Free and Fair Election has sent a letter today to Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, pointing out that the government is acting in such a way, in a manner that the local government election will be postponed indefinitely. It further stated that if the balance between the legislature, the executive and the judiciary, which is essential for the well-being of the country, is disrupted, there is scope for the democratic practices to be undermined. It also emphasized that no one will be able to relinquish themselves of the responsibility if the framework established to allow people to freely express themselves collapses. The PAFREL meanwhile submitted a set of queries to be answered by the Prime Minister in his capacity as the Minister of Public Administration, Home Affairs, Provincial Councils and Local Government. Accordingly, the first question put forward by the PAFREL was if the government is ready to hold the local government polls if any party provides a solution to the financial issue that the government points out as a major obstacle to holding the elections. They further questioned what the election procedure at the moment is, given that steps have been taken to reduce the number of demarked electorates and contestants. The PAFREL also inquired on whether the female and youth representation will be 25% each, given that the number of new contestants has been reduced by 50% to between 4,000 and 5,000. And if so, have the necessary approvals been obtained for the matter? It was also questioned if this includes the Janasabha program that has already been initiated. Now, the Ministry of Finance announced today that an interest-free loan would be provided to 5,000 students who sat for the GC Advanced Level examination recently but were unable to meet the requirements to get into a state university. Students would be provided the loan for 1 year of the undergraduate program and be required to pay after procuring a job. A statement issued by the Ministry of Finance announced today that a 1.1 million rupee interest-free loan would be provided for 5,000 students who don't qualify for higher education at a state university. The Finance Ministry stated that the government intends to recommence an 800,000 rupee loan scheme for students who wish to pursue a higher education outside the state universities. An additional 300,000 rupees will also be provided as everyday expenses. State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siamalapitiya said that the loan will be provided free of interest for select students who completed their GC Advanced Level examinations but were unable to meet the requirements to get into university. He went on to say that this was done taking into consideration the high interest rates of 25% issued for bank loans at present. State Minister Siamalapitiya stated that President Ranil Wickremesinghe had advised that the loan to be provided for 5,000 students. Students can apply for the loan at the state-run Bank of Ceylon and will in due course be made available through the People's Bank and the National Savings Bank. According to State Minister Siamalapitiya, the applicants' Z-score at the A-level examination as well as the value of their chosen stream to study for higher education will be taken into account when approving the loan. The statement further emphasized that the loan will be issued for a year after the completion of the undergraduate program and must be repaid after securing employment. Stay there for more news right after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. Now, the writ petition filed by former President Maithripala Sirisena against a private plaint filed against him pertaining to the 2019 Easter Sunday terror attack will be taken up before the Court of Appeal on the 31st of July. A two-judge bench comprising of Court of Appeal President Justice Nisanka Bandula Karunaratne and Justice A. Marikar issued the order this morning. Accordingly, the petition filed against the private plaint, which had been filed by Reverend Father Cyril Gamini and a victim of the Easter Sunday terror attacks, will be heard before a 5-judge appellate court bench on the 31st of July and the 9th of August. Previously, following summons issued by the Ford magistrate to the former president instructing him to appear before the courts, considering the private plaint filed against him, former President Frisena filed a writ petition before the Court of Appeal claiming that the summons issued were unlawful. Now, the Colombo Bourse closed higher today for a fourth week, helped by gains in financials and consumer staple stocks. The all-share price index rose by 0.77% to 9,670.42 points. Meanwhile, the S&P SL20 rose by 0.91% to end the day at 2,840.11. The trading volume for the CSE all-share price index fell to 55.7 million shares from 71.7 million in the previous session. Meanwhile, the market's turnover rose to 1.25 billion rupees from 1.23 billion rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net buyers in the equity market, purchasing stocks worth 387.2 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading 1.7 billion rupees worth of shares. The capital goods sector, in the meantime, was the top contributor to the market turnover, as the sector index lost 0.12%. The food, beverage and tobacco sector was the second highest contributor to the market turnover, whilst the index sector increased by 0.37%. During the week, the ASPI and the S&P SL20 gained 0.7% and 0.6% respectively, whilst recording a daily average turnover of 1.53 billion rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Now, oil prices fell today in a volatile trading, reversing earlier gains of more than $1 a barrel as banking sector fears set crude on course for its biggest weekly decline in months. Further, Saudi Arabia and Russia today affirmed their commitment to OPEC's Plus decision last October to cut production targets by 2 million barrels per day until the end of this year.
Brent crude futures fell by 1.02% to end the day at $73.94 a barrel. Meanwhile, US West Texas Intermediate crude was down by 0.76% and settled at $67.83. Both benchmarks hit more than one-year lows this week. Brent crude was on track for its biggest weekly fall since December at more than 10%, while US West Texas Intermediate was heading towards a loss of more than 11%, its biggest since last April. Pressure this week followed the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and trouble at Credit Suisse and First Republic Bank. Prices recovered some ground today after support measures from the European Central Bank and US lenders, but dropped again when Silicon Valley Bank Financial Group said it had filed for reorganization. The news also sent shares of big US banks down by more than 1.5% in pre-market trading. OPEC Plus members attributed this week's price weaknesses to financial drivers rather than any supply and demand imbalance, adding that they expected the market to stabilize. WTI's falls this week to less than $70 a barrel for the first time since December 2021 could spur the US government to start refilling its strategic petroleum reserve, boosting demand. Meanwhile, analysts expect China's demand recovery to add price support, with US crude exports to China in March heading towards their highest in nearly 2.5 years. In this backdrop, Saudi Arabia and Russia today affirmed their commitment to OPEC Plus decision, made last October to cut production targets by 2 million barrels per day until the end of 2023.
Now, the International Football Federation today approved the suspension of the Federation of Football of Sri Lanka from the organisation, while extending the suspension of the Zimbabwe Football Federation as well. The decision on the results of the vote was taken today at a long-awaited 73rd Congress of the World Football Governing Body in Kigali, Rwanda. Nearly 2,000 delegates, including top football executives from FIFA, met in Kigali for the Congress. The FIFA Congress, the supreme legislative body of FIFA, brings together top executives from FIFA, confederations and representatives from 211 member associations and other football stakeholders. The FIFA Council today recommended that Congress participants confirm the temporary suspension of the Sri Lankan football governing body. During the vote, out of the 211 FIFA member associations, 197 voted in favour of upholding the suspension. The suspension means that the national team and club teams of the country are not eligible to participate in international competitions until the decision is reversed. In addition, no member or official of the federation can benefit from FIFA development programs, courses or training. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Tune into our social media pages to stay updated on the very latest. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.